Welcome to Adam's Gardening Guides. I'm Adam Pascoe and this is my garden here in the East Midlands in the United Kingdom. Today we're looking at the winter garden, what's looking its best and the jobs you can be getting on with to keep your garden on track for the summer months ahead. We all want a bit of colour in our gardens over winter, so planting a few pansies will certainly cheer things up. Or how about their smaller relation, the violas, that come in so many different colours? Although I think yellow and gold do brighten up those long winter days. Just look at this viola white rose wing I grew in a hanging basket. What the flowers lack in size, they make up for in quantity, producing a profusion of blooms over many, many months if you deadhead them regularly to encourage further flowers to form. Fruits and berries can be bountiful as we move through from autumn into winter, but many of these won't last long if hungry birds are around. Cold weather and a shortage of other foods will put your berrying trees and shrubs on the menu, and it's strange how some berries prove irresistible while others last much longer through into winter. I particularly enjoy growing small and compact Panettia in some of my seasonal patio pot planting combinations. In this pot I included Skimmy Rubella with its bold red panicles of flower buds, with my favourite euphorbia, Ascot Rainbow, which carries these bright variegated leaves through winter until it flowers in late spring, alongside a gorgeous red berried Panettia whose fruits looked like shiny jewels through autumn and winter. And last year I planted up this hanging basket for winter colour using a small skimia called White Clove, a perennial Heuchera called Indian Summer, adding a lovely deep purple, almost black leaves to the display, and a small Panettia smothered with berries. And this basket provided extra colour and interest right through winter. Birds will eventually find the berries and eat them, and these are a favourite for my local blackbirds. For flowering shrubs, you don't have as much choice for winter colour as at other times of year, but I'd recommend taking a look at witch hazel that produces these unusual flowers with dainty twisting petals right in the depths of winter, like here on Hamamelis pallida. There are several winter heathers too. Can't say they appeal to me, so I haven't any in my own garden, but they have their place and they add winter interest in baskets and window boxes too. However, winter flowering Daphne Jacqueline Postil is quite special, an evergreen shrub that produces an exquisite display during the very coldest months of the year. And at warm days, it even tempts the bees out to feed from its deliciously fragrant flowers. These form at the very tips of every shoot, so position this bold shrub somewhere it has the space to flourish and in the prime position on full view through winter. And once we do move through to the middle and the end of winter, you can start looking for perennials like the Ornamental hellebores. This one's Anna's Red in the Frost Kiss series. This pure white snowdrift with its double flowered form surrounding a burst of golden stamens. Dark and impressive Helleborus Ice and Roses Red, and attractive pink veined petals on Ice and Roses Carlotta. But there are dozens of others you can choose from, so visit your local nurseries to see what you can find. Winter frost touches our garden plants too, doesn't it? Resting on the old flower heads of hydrangeas, left in place to protect the developing buds lower down the stems, and covering the upright foliage of hardy perennials like this euphorbia, boasting a crystal covering of shiny ice on frosty mornings. You might need to just replenish a little bit of fresh compost around, just to get the level about right. And then I'm going to use these modular pansies. I've got 12 of them to plant around this yucca, and they just ease out of little modular trays, beautifully rooted little pansies, and space them out as evenly as you can. Just make a little planting hole with your fingers and plant them so that the compost is about level with the surface of the compost in the pot. So just take them one at a time, make a little planting hole and squeeze it in. I plant them quite close to the edge of the pot so that they will grow up and you're able to easily see the flowering display, but they'll soon spread out. With 12 plants in here, I'll be positioned about evenly to the hours of a clock hand, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, all the way round. And I do like to plant generously because then I think they'll put on a bigger display and a bolder display of colour and go on flowering in flushes through the winter months and continue through to spring. But pansies and violas need deadheading regularly, so as soon as the flowers are over, just pick off these old flowers to stop the plants making seed heads which can bring their flowering season to an end. So every few weeks just go over your pansies and violas and pick off the old seed heads to encourage new flowers to develop over the coming weeks. Now my big pot has got drainage holes in the bottom so water will drain away, and I'm going to fill it with a peat-free compost. This compost will hold on to moisture, but it's quite free draining, and I'll fill it about 2/3 full so that the level of the compost is a good 6-7 inches below the rim of the pot. Just firm down lightly with your fingers. Now you can choose any tulip variety to grow in a pot. Any variety will be perfect. The bulbs themselves have got a tip and a basal plate, so always make sure you plant tulips the right way up. Spread the tulips out. I plant them about 3 to 4 inches apart, and I start by going around the edge of the pot itself. Then I plant one bulb in the middle and space the remaining bulbs around. Again, you'll notice they're evenly spaced and about 3 to 4 inches apart between bulbs. So a pot of this size, a good 2-foot pot, will hold 24 or so bulbs. You could plant a few more and plant a bit more generously, but this should be fine. And the bulbs are planted so that they will be covered by at least twice their depth in compost. I planted mine a tiny bit deeper. I don't want the flowers to blow over in the wind, so I think planting them about 5-6 inches deep, covering with compost, will be perfect for this variety. And once all the bulbs are planted, cover with compost. Again, I'm using this peat-free multi-purpose compost. Continue adding compost till it sits 1 inch or 2 below the rim of the pot. That's perfect. Just lightly firm down with your fingertips, but don't consolidate it too hard. Now just water thoroughly to settle the compost down around the bulbs. Make sure the compost is nice and moist. You might need to water a little bit during the winter if the compost looks dry. Otherwise, I keep these pots in a sheltered part of the garden. Some are in the sun, but sheltered so that hopefully the compost doesn't freeze and get waterlogged. And then the bulbs will grow up and you'll have a beautiful flowering display to enjoy next spring. I've been sweeping up leaves throughout the autumn, especially for my paths, to stop them getting slippery and causing a hazard. A carpet of leaves from my silver birch tree always falls over my lawn, and I find it easiest to choose a dry day to run the lawnmower up and down the lawn with the blade set high, chopping the leaves up into smaller pieces as it picks them up. These can then be packed into old compost bags and stored to rot down, punching a few holes in the base of the bag to make sure that the leaves don't get waterlogged, but tying over the top to prevent the leaves from drying out. It does take time for the final leaves to fall from a neighbour's oak tree, so once they have, I choose a dry day to collect them up from my patio, my paths and my borders. For this, I find an electric garden vac ideal. Collecting all the leaves I'm then packing these into bags to compost down to develop into leaf mould. This rotting process does take time, so be patient, with some thick leaves taking a good year or two to rot down completely. So it is important to open up the bags occasionally through summer, just to check that the leaves haven't dried out and that the rotting process is taking place under the action of microbes and other organisms. If the leaves are damp, all well and good, but if they're dry, sprinkle on some extra water, mix the leaves up, turn over the top and leave them to compost down even further. As far as hydrangeas in winter are concerned, I leave these old flower heads in place throughout the winter. I won't cut these away until much closer to spring. They just give a little bit of protection to the shoots and the new buds below. So leave the heads on your mop head and lace cap hydrangeas, and then when it comes to springtime, probably March into April time, I'll follow these down and I'll prune above some buds which are fattening up and swelling up nicely now. But if you prune too early, you'll get new growth, and that new growth can be damaged by frost. So delay pruning until the spring and leave this in the winter, come back to it later in spring. I've always loved shrubs, and they form the backbone to many of my garden beds and boundaries. So here are a few winter flowering shrubs that might take your fancy, like sweet box, a small suckering evergreen shrub with pointed lance-shaped leaves and a delicate little creamy white flower right the way through winter, where it fills the air around with its beautiful fragrance. As the flowers fade, they develop into small black berries as we move through into spring. Sarcococca doesn't grow too big, so remains a manageable size for small gardens, only growing to about 3 to 4 foot in height, but it's a robust evergreen shrub that even grows in shade. For something taller and altogether more striking and architectural, check out Mahonias. These produce their striking spikes of golden flowers through autumn and winter too, with the exact time they're at their best depending very much on the variety you choose and your local weather conditions. And for something fragrant, check out Winter Sweet, that produce dainty small yellow flowers along the lengths of their bare winter branches through the winter months. Now, Chimonanthus praecox will need space, as it can grow to 10 foot or more in height over time, mind you. New plants can take a couple of years to establish before they flower, but then you'll be able to cut a sprig or two in the depths of winter to bring indoors to enjoy its delicious scent. Clematis Arabella is a non-climbing clematis. You'll need to give some support to. You could just grow it in a border and let it clamber over the other plants. I've put this metal obelisk support in here, and what I want to do is to encourage new growth from the bottom, not high up. So I can already see high up on these old stems some green shoots starting to form. So even in winter, I think it's time to literally give this quite a good cut down. Cutting it down to maybe 10 inches a foot from soil level, sometimes even more. What I don't want is all of this new growth to stay in place and get new shoots developing higher up, otherwise the plant will take off and get into my neighbour's garden. So I'm going to cut all of this away because I want the new shoots to develop low down on the stems to grow up this support through the growing season, and then put a good flowering display onto this obelisk to enjoy through the summer. So now is the time to cut away all of this growth to avoid it wasting energy forming shoots higher up. It's always a pleasure sharing my hints, tips, ideas and advice with everyone. So please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button right away and subscribe to my gardening channel. There's plenty more videos on my channel for you to enjoy too. And remember to keep the blades of your secateurs as sharp as possible. I've got one of these little sharpening tools which has got an abrasive surface on it. So after I've used them every day, I will just gently sharpen up and hone up the blade of the secateur so that it is as sharp and ready to use again. Just keeps the blade really sharp, so I'm out in the garden pruning, I'm sure of a really clean cut every time. I do have a sort of love-hate relationship with ivy. I like its evergreen colour, providing some winter colour, but it never stops growing. And here along this short wall dividing my garden from my neighbours, I've got the ivy, this variegated variety, growing up, but it will soon take over and the shoots grow over the top of the wall and will start spreading. So about this time of year I will be ruthless and just cut it back so that the ivy itself isn't spreading up over the top of the wall. Pull it back. You can trim over the whole there if you want, just cutting off any long lanky pieces to tidy it up, but by shortening these shoots and making sure that the top is a few inches below the top of the wall, this means that the ivy isn't going to escape my garden and invade my neighbours. And while I was just controlling the growth of this ivy, I've noticed, if you ever wondered where snails go and hibernate in winter, here's one just hiding in among the ivy on this wall. So it's certainly worth keeping a lookout during your clear up operations to see if you can find any hidey holes, and if you find any snails you can remove them. Ornamental grasses need pruning in winter before they start growing, so don't delay pruning things like the Japanese bloodgrass, Imperata rubra, that forms a lovely pot plant with its beautiful red stems and leaves. Or miscanthus, lots of varieties of the Miscanthus sabrinus which will grow well in ornamental pots. These need to be pruned in winter too. And the way to prune them is to cut all of this growth that developed last year right down to its base. So all of these stems can be cut off just above compost level if they're in a pot, or soil level if they're in a border. Cut all of this growth away, and this clears the decks, getting rid of last year's growth. And you'll notice through to the end of winter into the beginning of spring you'll start getting some new shoots. There's a few slightly greeny bits already at the base of some of these shoots, but what you don't want to do is to delay. If you delay pruning, you'll have new shoots coming up through this old growth, which makes pruning a really tricky job, trying to cut out the old and not damage the new. So there we are, a few little new fronds already developing. That's pruned. The same with Imperata, the Japanese bloodgrass. Whether it's in pots or borders, cut away all of last year's growth and you will be getting new shoots developing in the spring to give you this wonderful display of red leaves to enjoy right the way through summer. But on some of these variegated forms, they have a nasty habit of reverting back to plain green, and here we have it, plain green shoot just coming out, which you need to either snap away at its base completely or prune off. If you leave these green shoots in place, then sometimes they can be much more vigorous than their variegated counterpart and they can start taking over. So check your evergreen shrubs, particularly your variegated ones, through winter, and if you spot any plain green leaves, remove them completely. There's another one just here again, just follow that back down. You can prune it away or just literally break it off completely. Holly is always a seasonal favourite in the winter garden, but if you want to preserve a few sprigs of berries to use for festive arrangements, perhaps in a winter wreath or for Christmas decorations, then it could be worth wrapping a piece of fleece or netting around a few of the stems to keep the birds away and preserve the berries for you. Cotoneaster always produces generous crops of red berries, and I'm grateful to several of my neighbours who grow these as hedging plants around their gardens so I can enjoy them on my daily dog walks through winter. Firethorn or pyracantha is another good evergreen screening shrub, great for training up walls and fences, and its stems are dripping with berries during winter. Red bearing varieties always look good, but you can also find varieties with yellow or golden berries, and these could fit in better with your displays. Skimmia reevesiana is another great choice for winter pot displays. This is an evergreen shrub that flowers through late summer, and these really tight terminal clusters of berries develop in autumn and last right through winter on my patio displays. You'll find small skimmia plants covered with berries available in garden centres through autumn, perfect for planting into pots. And after a few years, when they've grown larger, you can tip them out and find a permanent home for them out in your garden. Calicarpa carries its vibrant purple berries through autumn and into winter, with all the leaves falling eventually to leave the berries decorating its naked stems. And these glowing berries of hardy perennial Iris foetidissima are revealed through autumn as their seed heads burst open, and they'll last for many weeks until the birds eventually eat them. But do be aware if you're growing this plant around your garden, because it does self-seed quite profusely, so be warned. My neighbour's red sentinel crabapple always produces a good crop of fruits, and it's not unusual for these to last right the way through winter until eventually the hungry pigeons clear any remaining fruits just before the new growth and blossom in spring. My Anthemis EC Buxton put on a really glorious display over a long period of time last summer. It's a hardy perennial. I've got new growth coming up from the bottom, so what I'm going to do now in winter is just to remove the plant supports which I had in place last summer and cut away all of last year's growth, and that means chopping off these stems right down at the base. Cut the old growth away, and this will be cleared up. Got a couple more supports in here I can remove in a minute as well, but for the time being I want to get rid of all of the shoots that developed last year. Just remove this plant support here. All of these shoots can be cut down just to as close as you can to their base, because these won't carry flowers again this season. What I want to do is to clear the decks so that these new shoots will grow up in spring. I can train them in, give them some support, and they'll carry flowers throughout next summer. I grow lots of hostas in pots because I love their leaves, providing interest on the patios throughout the summer. But then I've moved my pots to the back of my pergola arch for the winter. The leaves have all died down, and now it's time to just clean all of this growth away. It's all died back down now. These are completely hardy perennials, so all of this growth has died away, and in the spring the new shoots will develop up. If it's a very congested hosta, then I might lift and divide them, and you'll find a video on my channel which shows you how to divide congested hostas. But in the winter, it's just time to clear away all of this old growth, and new shoots will soon be emerging in here, and we'll see those in the spring. Some plants, even though they're nearly hardy, really benefit for some winter protection. And my little Eriostemon here, I think they call it the gin and tonic plant, can be hardy down to about -4 or 5 degrees, but I don't want to risk it. I'm not going to let it be hurt by frost. So what I've done is to put one of my cloches over the top to give it some extra protection from cold through the winter. It's just going to keep the worst of the frost off, so hopefully once the weather warms up in spring I can remove this cloche completely and enjoy these beautiful variegated foliage and flowers through the rest of the year. If you've got a store of plant pots and saucers, then use the opportunity in winter to give them a thorough clean and a scrub. You can just put a little bit of disinfectant into a bucket of water, scrub them clean, and then these will be ready for planting with your veg and your crops and your flowers next summer. And as the weather gets colder, any irrigation equipment you've got outside, hose reels and carts, hose guns, anything like that can be removed from the tap, and this can be stored away for the winter. I'm going to put this in my shed, just drain out the hose pipe itself, store that away in a frost-free place. Shed or a garage is ideal, and keep that under cover during the frosty weather so that the pipes and the nozzles and so on don't get damaged by frost when the water freezes. Don't forget to feed your garden birds through winter either. I put up a variety of foods to keep a wide range of birds happy, including peanuts, there's fat balls, great for winter feeding, and mixed seed with sunflower hearts, and keep topping these feeders up regularly. And I've also attached a clear perspex feeder to my window to bring the birds in even closer, like these lovely robins picking out their favourite seeds from the assortment on offer. If you've had a cold frosty night, check outside, because the water on your bird bath will have frozen solid, and I want to make sure the birds have got some water to drink during the day. So when I make my first morning cup of tea, I get a kettle of boiling water and I just melt the water on the bird bath to make sure that the birds can drink during the day. I've just left these old flower stems on to enjoy through the winter, but as we get through to the end of winter, beginning of spring, you notice if you look down at the base of your sedum plants, you can already see some new shoots growing, like on this lovely variegated variety called Hydrangeas. And now it's time to just remove these old stems. You need to prune them away at the bottom, and then it will make way for the new growth which is developing. So just get down, low down on the stems, cut away the old flower stems, and you will reveal the new shoots just developing, which will grow up in the spring, produce a lovely display of leaves, and then late summer into autumn give you a nice display of flowers too. Just continue cutting away all of these old shoots right down at their base. One of my favourite clematis is Dr. Rupel, which I've planted at the base of a pear tree and train it up into the branches to layer on some extra colour through the summer. Now if I leave this growth of Dr. Rupel, you can see already at the end of winter I've got new shoots, these green shoots developing high up. But if I leave this unpruned, the clematis is just going to get taller and taller, very leggy, flowers at the top and nothing at the bottom. What you've got to do with summer flowering clematis is to follow these shoots down, which developed last year. Although they've got shoots on them, I'm going to have to prune these away because I want to follow them down, low down, really as low down on the plant as you can, to where there are some green shoots or some buds growing at the bottom. So really any time through winter up until the end of February, it's a good time to check these clematis and see where you can prune them down to. So all of this top growth can come away. If I leave this in place, the plant will get very leggy. So start by just removing as much of this leggy top growth as you can, which is grown right up into the branches of my pear tree. So get rid of all of this, cut it down completely, and then once you've cleared the decks, we can actually work out where we can prune down to. So now with a lot of the top growth cut away, just follow those stems down and just find where there's some buds growing out from the shoot and prune above those. Remove all the top growth and cut down some low buds. They could be 2 foot from soil level, a foot from soil level, or even lower down, but just follow all of that growth down and cut just above where there's some new green buds developing. So like here on the clematis, growth is coming up and a couple of foot from soil level. I've got the old stem that grew last year, these lovely new fat buds, so I can trim away the old growth just above there, cut that away, and these buds will grow out this year and they will give me the shoots which will carry flowers later this summer. I use dozens of plant labels every year, but I want to recycle them, clean them to use another year. I use some of this paste cleaner, which is slightly abrasive. Just put some of this onto a sponge and then you can rub it over your plant labels to clean off last year's name so that they're ready to use. Just a few more to go. I really hope you're enjoying this video, and if you are, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.